I couldn't believe my eyes as the plane descended, the turquoise water shimmering like a promise of paradise. My husband and I had been dreaming about this honeymoon for months, and now it was finally here. Stepping onto the soft white sand felt like stepping into a dream. Everything was so perfect, so full of possibility. The resort was everything we'd hoped for: gentle ocean breezes, towering palms swaying softly, and that luxurious hum in the air that made me feel like anything was possible. We checked in, laughing as we explored the marble lobby, already teasing each other about who would be the first to jump into the pool. Our suite felt like a little slice of heaven, a private balcony overlooking that endless blue sea. I stood there for a moment, breathing it all in, feeling the salty air fill my lungs. My heart was so full it almost hurt. We'd promised each other we'd make this trip unforgettable, and in that moment, I knew we would. That first evening, we ended up at the resort's most romantic restaurant, candles flickering as we shared fresh seafood and glasses of chilled wine. I felt like we were in our own little world, completely wrapped up in each other. But that night took a turn I didn't expect. Another couple, Emily and David, were seated nearby, also on their honeymoon. Before long, we were all laughing together, sharing stories about our weddings and toasting to new beginnings. As the night went on, the laughter around our table grew louder and easier, like we'd known each other for years instead of hours. Emily and I hit it off immediately. She had this warmth about her, a sparkle in her eye that made me feel like I could tell her anything. We swapped stories about our weddings, sharing little mishaps and the sweet, quiet moments we'd cherished. She was so easy to talk to, and I felt a kind of kinship with her that was unexpected but so welcome. David, on the other hand, had this steady calm that reminded me of my husband. They seemed to get along like old friends, trading jokes and clinking glasses. I watched them talk about fishing trips and golf swings, their laughter blending with the music drifting in from the band near the beach. It felt like we were part of something special. 4 newlyweds, all caught up in the magic of this island and the promise of forever. For a moment, I looked across the table and caught my husband's eyes, the candlelight softening his features. I reached out, squeezing his hand, and he smiled at me in that way that made my heart flutter. Everything felt so right, so full of hope and connection. We ended the night with one last toast: to love, to new friendships, and to a future that, in that moment, felt so bright and certain. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I was still floating in that warm, happy haze from the night before. We had breakfast by the ocean, the waves whispering against the shore and the smell of fresh pastries filling the air. I couldn't stop thinking about how easily we'd clicked with Emily and David. It felt like we'd stumbled into something rare, a friendship that was effortless and honest, even in such a short time. We spent the day exploring the island, the 4 of us wandering through local markets, tasting fruit so sweet it almost didn't seem real. Every time I looked over at Emily, she'd flash me this wide, genuine smile that made me feel like I wasn't just on vacation. I was part of something bigger. My husband and David were already talking about renting jet skis for the next day, their excitement bubbling over with every new idea. That night, as we sat around a fire pit on the beach, sharing stories and letting the ocean breeze cool our sun-kissed skin, I felt a kind of contentment I hadn't felt in years. We were 4 people brought together by chance, but it was like the universe had nudged us all here for a reason. As I watched the flames flicker and listened to the laughter that spilled out so easily, I couldn't have imagined the twist that was coming, the moment that would change everything. Over the next few days, it felt like we'd become this inseparable little group, exploring every inch of the island together. We went snorkeling in crystal-clear water, chasing colorful fish that shimmered like jewels under the waves. I remember feeling a childlike wonder bubble up in me, each dive a new discovery, each laugh a reminder of how lucky I felt to be there. Emily would swim up beside me and tug my hand, her grin as bright as the sun above us. When we weren't in the water, we were feasting on local delicacies and dancing under the moonlight at beachside bars. There was a rhythm to those nights. The sound of waves crashing, the distant beat of island drums, and the soft hush of secrets whispered between new friends. I'd catch my husband's eye across the table and feel my heart swell, the sparkle of the night reflecting in his gaze. But there was something else too. a flicker of doubt I didn't quite understand. It was the way he'd lean in a little too close when Emily laughed, or how his eyes would linger on her just a moment longer than necessary. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was just the easy camaraderie of new friends. But late at night, as I lay in bed with the ocean's song outside our window, that doubt kept creeping back in, quiet but insistent. Emily and I grew closer with each passing day, sharing more than just cocktails and sunset walks. She told me stories about her childhood, about the way she'd always dreamed of traveling the world with someone who made her feel safe. I could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the way her fingers traced the rim of her glass when she spoke. I shared my own stories, too, about my hopes for the future, the life I pictured with my husband, and the little insecurities I never dared say out loud before. One afternoon, my husband surprised me by suggesting I take a morning at the spa, a chance to relax and treat myself. "You deserve it," he'd said, pressing a kiss to my forehead. I wanted to believe him, to let the warm oils and calming music melt away any worries I had. But as I closed my eyes and let the massage therapist work away the tension in my shoulders, a strange feeling settled in my chest, a flicker of suspicion I didn't want to name. While I was at the spa, Emily and my husband decided to go on a different adventure. They planned it so quickly I barely had time to say I'd rather be with them. Still, I told myself to let it go, to enjoy this rare moment of peace. Lying there in that serene room, I tried to push away the nagging feeling that something wasn't right, even as it kept tapping at the edges of my mind. That afternoon, I stepped out of the spa feeling like a new woman, my skin glowing and my muscles loose and relaxed. I was determined to keep the calm going, to not let that little twinge of doubt spoil the rest of the day. So I wandered around the resort for a bit, breathing in the salty air and listening to the laughter that drifted from the pool. I told myself this was what a honeymoon should be, moments of bliss and indulgence, shared with the man I loved. But as I walked back to our suite, a part of me couldn't help but wonder where they were. Emily and my husband had said they'd be back by now, but the room was empty, the bed still neatly made. I tried to brush it off, telling myself they'd probably gotten caught up in some spontaneous adventure. After all, that's what this trip was supposed to be about. Freedom and fun, right? Still, the thought of them together, alone, kept picking at the back of my mind like a loose thread. I made myself a cup of tea and sat on the balcony, the view of the ocean so breathtaking it almost felt like an insult. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, painting everything in gold and pink, I found myself holding on to that tiny sliver of doubt, unsure of what it would mean in the days to come. The next day, I decided to check out the front desk to ask about an excursion. I thought maybe I could plan a little surprise for my husband, something to bring back that spark I'd felt slipping between my fingers. As I stood there, waiting for the receptionist to finish helping another guest, I noticed a monitor tucked behind the counter, flickering with black and white security footage. I don't know why I looked. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was something deeper, that whisper of doubt that had been growing in the back of my mind. My eyes scanned the screens, taking in the different corners of the resort, the empty lobby, the quiet hallways, the pool shimmering in the sun. And then, in one small frame, I saw them. There was my husband, leaning in close to Emily in a shadowy corridor, his hands on her waist and their heads bent together in a way that left no room for doubt. I felt my breath catch in my throat, my heart pounding so loudly I thought the woman at the desk might hear it. My stomach dropped, and for a moment, the world seemed to tilt sideways. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. It felt like I was watching a nightmare unfold in real time, the kind that leaves you gasping awake in the middle of the night. They were kissing, not just a fleeting accidental brush, but a real hungry kiss. I saw the way he held her, the way her hands curled around his neck, and it felt like something inside me cracked wide open. I didn't know what to do. My first instinct was to scream, to run and drag them out into the open, but instead, I just stood there, rooted to the spot. My fingers fumbled for my phone, the screen blurring as tears welled up in my eyes. I pressed record, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it, but I needed proof. I needed to see it again, to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. When they pulled away and started walking down the hallway hand in hand, it was like a final blow. My heart felt hollow, my breath shallow, and I realized I'd been holding it in for far too long. I turned away from the monitor, clutching my phone like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely. I stumbled back to our room, each step feeling heavy and surreal, like I was wading through water. My mind was a blur of questions and disbelief, every memory of our laughter and late-night talks turning sour in my chest. When I got to the door, I paused for a moment, pressing my forehead against the cool wood, trying to steady my breathing. Inside, everything looked the same. The rumpled bed, the half-empty wine glasses on the table. But it all felt like a lie now. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the footage still playing in my mind on an endless loop. My hands were cold, my skin prickling as I thought about what I'd just seen. My husband's smile, the way he held me at night. All of it suddenly felt hollow. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I needed time to think, to figure out what came next. So I sat there in the fading light, clutching my phone like it held the answers I so desperately needed. In that quiet moment, I realized I had a choice to make. And as much as it hurt, I knew I couldn't let this betrayal break me. I spent the rest of that afternoon wrestling with what to do. My mind kept replaying that kiss, the way their bodies curved toward each other like they belonged together. But I also kept thinking about David, how he'd trusted Emily, how he'd looked at her the same way I used to look at my husband. He deserved to know the truth, as much as it hurt to say it out loud. I found him later, sitting alone at the bar by the pool, his eyes lost in the blue of the ocean. My hands were trembling as I walked over to him, my heart hammering so hard it was all I could hear. "David," I said, my voice catching in my throat. He turned to me, his brow furrowed, and I could see the confusion in his eyes. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone, my hand shaking as I pressed play. He watched in silence, his face going pale as the footage flickered on the screen. I could see the exact moment his world cracked open, the pain flooding his eyes as he realized what Emily had done. I reached out, my fingers brushing his arm, offering a kind of comfort I didn't even know I had to give. For a long moment, neither of us said a word. The air between us felt heavy, every breath tight with the weight of betrayal. I could see David's jaw working as he struggled to process what he was seeing, the woman he'd promised forever to, wrapped in the arms of another man. My husband. Our trust, our vows, all of it shattered in that flickering video. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and tight. "I can't believe this," he said, his eyes still locked on the screen. I nodded, swallowing hard, feeling the same disbelief clawing at my throat. "I didn't want to tell you this way," I whispered. "But you deserve to know. We both did." I could feel the tremor in my voice, the raw edge of hurt that wouldn't go away no matter how hard I tried to bury it. David let out a shaky breath, turning to look at me with an expression that was equal parts devastation and resolve. "What do we do now?" he asked. In that moment, I knew we had a choice: to let their betrayal break us or to find some way to take back the power they'd stolen. And as I met his eyes, I knew what I wanted. I wanted them to know exactly what they'd done to us. We spent hours talking that night, piecing together everything that had led us here. Our laughter from just days ago felt like a cruel echo, each memory of those early nights turning sharp in the light of what we'd learned. But in that pain, we found something unexpected, a kind of solidarity, a shared resolve that came from knowing we weren't alone in this heartbreak. David and I mapped out every detail of what we'd seen, every careless smile and lingering touch that now made sense. The more we talked, the more our anger grew, not just at them, but at how they'd made us doubt ourselves, made us feel small and foolish. I could see the same fire in David's eyes that burned in my chest, a quiet determination that said we wouldn't let this be the end of our story. By the time the moon had risen high in the sky, we had a plan. Not just to confront them, but to make sure they never forgot what they'd done to us. As I looked at David across that dimly lit bar, I realized that in the middle of all this betrayal, we'd found something worth holding on to, the power to take our story back. The next evening, The resort's grand restaurant buzzed with laughter and the clink of crystal glasses. Everyone was dressed to the nines, the women in flowing dresses, the men in crisp white shirts, all gathered under the soft glow of chandeliers and flickering candles. My heart thudded in my chest as I walked in with David by my side, our plan as sharp as the glint of silverware on the table. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me, but it was a different kind of pressure now. Not the panic of betrayal, but the steady pulse of resolve. David and I exchanged a glance, a silent promise that whatever happened next, we'd face it together. My husband and Emily sat at a table near the center of the room, their heads bent close in laughter that turned my stomach to stone. I forced a smile as I approached, my palms damp with anticipation. "Mind if we join you?" I asked, my voice calm, almost sweet. They looked up, surprise flickering in their eyes. Emily's smile faltered just for a moment, but my husband reached for my hand like nothing was wrong. As we took our seats, I could feel the adrenaline thrumming in my veins, the calm before the storm. The dinner began like any other, clinking glasses, polite conversation, the sweet strains of music drifting in from the pianist in the corner. But every word felt like it was wrapped in barbed wire. I watched my husband smile, the easy way he spoke to me as if nothing had happened. I played my part, nodding and laughing at the right moments, though every muscle in my body was coiled tight. David sat across from me, his face a careful mask of calm. Beneath the table, I felt his knee bump gently against mine, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. My hand was wrapped around my phone in my lap, the video ready to play at the press of a button. I waited, my heart pounding in my ears, for just the right moment to shatter the illusion. When the waiter brought out the dessert, I leaned back in my chair, catching Emily's eye. "You know," I said softly, my voice almost casual, "I think it's time we all saw something." My fingers tapped the screen, and the footage flickered to life, the grainy black and white of the security camera glowing in the dim candlelight. The table fell silent, the only sound the soft crack of a sugar crust breaking beneath someone's spoon. The moment the video played, their laughter died on their lips. Emily's face drained of color, her mouth opening, but no words coming out. My husband's eyes went wide, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath, every flickering candle casting their stunned faces into sharper relief. I watched them squirm, the footage playing on loop, the betrayal laid bare for everyone to see. For a moment, I felt a surge of power, not the kind that hurts, but the kind that sets you free. My voice was calm as I looked at them, my hand steady. "You thought you could hide this from us," I said quietly, my eyes locked on my husband's face. "But you don't get to rewrite the truth." David and I stood up together, our chairs scraping softly against the polished floor. We walked out without another word, leaving the table in stunned silence. As we stepped into the night air, I felt lighter than I had in days. We weren't the ones who had to carry the shame anymore. We'd taken back our dignity, and in that quiet victory, we found the strength to start over. Not as lovers, but as survivors.